Welcome to Mind Your Business, a deep social podcast presented by me, David Pawsey. In this series, I'll be talking to people from lots of different businesses and industries to find out what the challenges they've faced in order to progress through their career. Thanks for listening, and please check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and all the other major podcast channels. In the first episode, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jody Raynsford. Jody's a best-selling author. He's the co-host of award-winning podcast Bad Boy Running. He's a marketing genius, and I've known him for quite a long time, which will obviously become quite apparent in the episode. There was a bit of silliness, perhaps some comments that some people might find offensive. But in the episode, Jody talks about the importance of creating an environment where you tell people that your brand isn't right for them.
We're pretty unapologetic about how we talk about brands, about how terrible some of the things they do are and how useless they are.
He also talks about how Cliff Richard influenced an incredibly successful product launch.
I don't know why at that point I thought of Cliff Richard and mistletoe and wine.
And also how powerful podcasting is as a medium in generating engagement and community with your customers and clients. Regardless of your business or organisation.
With podcasting, it's a very, very intimate thing. It feels like you're sat in that conversation as well.
So check out the episode, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Hi Jody, great to see you. It's been a while.
Do all your podcasts start with a burst of laughter, or is it just because I'm sat opposite you?
It's the first one. It's the first one. But one thing I do want to start by saying.
Yep.
And it's probably going to sound like a backhanded comment. It's the only ones I give. But I want to thank you, because I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for you. As you might have seen on the screen, the viewers at home. But Jody runs the Bad Boy Running podcast, which is one of the many things we're going to talk about. And yeah, I guess that encouraged me, incentivized me to do this. I was like, God, it can't be that hard. But no, I mean, like the way that you got Bad Boy Running up and the way you've built the community, has been an inspiration. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, yeah.
So after that, we'll go. There's no more of that for the rest of this podcast.
Well, the other thing actually was I was going to bring in a kettle, because when we used to share an office, don't know if you remember this, you were recording an episode. I didn't really realise, and I wandered down to where you were recording and started boiling the kettle to make myself a cup of tea. So apologies for that.
Oh no, there's worse that's happened, honestly. There's worse that's happened than that.
But anyway, welcome to Mind Your Business.
Wow, it's nice being a guest on a podcast that you are hosting.
Oh, thank you very much. So, tell me about your business. What is your business and how did you get into it?
So I now have like a multifaceted business. So my background is much like yours as a journalist and a copywriter. And originally I set up my agency, Hello Genius, to provide content, copy, messaging, all those kind of things. It's evolved since then. So it's evolved. Now it's very much brand strategy, messaging, positioning, all of those things that a lot of businesses want, mainly kind of challenger brand businesses, businesses that are looking to do something different. And as a result of the book that I've written, getting a lot more people who are interested in doing something a bit different, being a bit bolder. So really kind of specializing in messaging. AI has had a big impact on that as well. So people feel more empowered to be able to use AI in the business, be able to their marketing teams using AI. So it's really kind of focusing on the strategic aspects of marketing, that stuff that's really still essential, really kind of understanding, what is the future of what we're doing as a business? How can we use AI effectively? Where are the right places to use AI, and how do we do that in-house?
So, I mean, obviously, you talked about your background in journalism, and I know one of the things that you've shared on social media is a paperclip cutting of you as a young lad doing work experience in a newspaper as a journalist.
Yes, at the Worthing Herald, that was, yes. Right.
So, I mean, obviously, that's obviously something you wanted to do from a very young age. I mean, you say, similar backgrounds. My journalism was financial journalism, whereas your journalism was working in movie journalism.
Yeah, that sounds really, really exciting until you actually until you actually do it. The thing is with something like that is that most people that want to be journalists in the sectors they're in, they do it because they're enthusiastic about it. Like being involved in film and TV and things like that, you get really enthusiastic about that. And then as a result of doing that for however many years I did that, it kind of really kills your enthusiasm for it. Like I think when I stopped working in like film and TV journalism, I used to love going to the cinema. I used to love going to movies and things like that, and it just killed it for me. And that's kind of like the really sad thing about that, because I love movies. Like I literally, like even my children say to me, is it possible for you to not quote a movie or use some lines? They realise that all of my lines are from various movies, mainly Jim Carrey or Arnold Schwarzenegger films. But yeah, it's an interesting one because everyone thinks like something like film and TV is really interesting. But I started off on the trade side. I mean, this shows you how old I am. I started off in the trade side on a trade magazine that was for rental shops, independent rental stores, and VHS.
Right.
I mean, like you talk about an industry that's in disruption, like, when like DVDs came in and then digital and, the switch from rental to retail and everything else as well. So there was all of that. There was all that kind of political stuff. And then I moved into the consumer stuff. And the consumer stuff's good because that's when you go and do the exciting stuff, when you go and meet celebrities and you go and meet, people in posh hotels in central London and realise what awful human beings they are, or how boring they are, or things like that. And at the time, I was thinking, you think, oh God, all these experiences are weird, but you kind of you keep them there. You keep them there. You hold those stories in your mind, and you find ways of then telling those stories and relating them back to it. So, like in like my books and in my emails and everything else, like I'm constantly referring to the time I went to WrestleMania, the time that a wrestler nearly beat me up when I was interviewing him. At the time when I interviewed Tom Hardy and he was weird. The time then, a German reporter called Heather Graham a slut. All of those exciting moments that you don't hear about, somehow relating them back to the things that we're doing. But yeah, it kind of kills it for you. So I then went into running journalism, and then almost killed it for me on that as well. So.
Well, obviously, one of the pictures on the screen, I'm guessing, is that from Marathon des Sables?
So that was before Marathon des Sables. So that's how I got into running journalism, and it was mainly through our mutual connection, Ali Upham, because he was doing some tech stuff for men's running, which I think was only on edition 2 or something, and the editor of that, Danny Coyle, got in touch and he'd heard that I was doing Marathon des Sables, and this was like back in 2008, 2009, and just no one knew about Marathon des Sables.
Well, obviously it is a lot well known now.
Thanks to you. Thanks to me breaking it to so they didn't have a journalist who'd done it before. Now the year before I did it, James Cracknell did it, and that really kind of put it on the map. Right. So he did it, and I think he came 8th or something like that, which, considering what it's like, considering his size and everything else, was incredible. But yeah, I had all these kind of ideas of, oh, this is great. I'm gonna work for this magazine, and we're gonna go and do this photo. I had to go to Crystal Palace Stadium. We're gonna do this photo shoot. They're gonna make me look incredible. Like I'm gonna have all these running pictures of like you see with influencers now. I'm gonna look at all these running pictures. I'm gonna look like Daley Thompson or something like that. I'm gonna look incredible. And then they stuck me in a sand pit. And like maybe end my gear. I'm like, this is not what I was expecting, just to be sat in a sandpit with explaining why I've got a venom pump or whatever else. And then it kind of went on from there. And actually, that was the working for Men's Running for that period of time, and realizing that positioning that, because they position that against Runner's World as like it's runners. It's women's running had obviously done very well, but men's running was like the jokey alternative to it. And I think it worked really well, and it really suited my personality, and that's where essentially I met David on the Sierra Leone Marathon, which
your co-host,
my co-host on Bad Boy Running. And the way that they positioned me and the way that I was positioned was with ultras were becoming bigger, trails were becoming bigger, people were covering them, but how do we cover them in a way that makes our person who's covering it look ridiculous?
Sorry to interrupt, but I thought now would be a good time to tell you about the podcast and content creation services we offer at Deep Social. Not only can we record and edit your business podcast, which is a fantastic way of sharing your expertise and building deep bonds with your target audience, but we can transform each episode into blog content, white papers, LinkedIn posts, video shorts, a whole selection of marketing content that drives more leads to your business. So drop me an email at david@deepsocial.co.uk to discuss how we can elevate your content marketing success. Now I'll let you get back to the episode. I mean, just to backtrack, can you explain for people that don't know what the Marathon des Sables is?
So the Marathon des Sables is it's a 5-day or 6-day now foot race in the Sahara Desert in the Western Sahara. You have to take all of your kit. You are given tents overnight, and essentially you run just under a marathon each day. You have one day where you have a kind of a double marathon, known as the long day, and it's one of those kind of entry points. It's one of those big events that lots of people kind of do. That's it's a big event in their running career, in their running life. It's got very expensive now, very kind of popular as well. And it's it bills itself as the toughest foot race, and for a lot of people, it will be the toughest thing that they ever do. But it's brilliant, like amazing camaraderie, over the top administration because it's French run, but just a kind of wonderful thing. And that really doing that and kind of reporting on that and really kind of made me then want to do all the other kind of events and things like that. And it sent me to doing the Transalpine race, sent me to doing 100 milers, all of those kind of things as well. And when men's running then decided to try and compete with Runners World, that's when it was like clear that that didn't suit my journalism. Like, I'm there to be kind of the amusing character who's getting it all wrong, who's making messing up and things like that.
You were Carl Pilkington.
Pilkington, that's it. Yeah, but the thing is, that's what that's not a great thing for PR, but that's one of the owners of one of the PR agencies said to me. She's like, the way that you're kind of like a Carl Pilkington of the running world. And I'm like, great. But it's kind of that, like, constantly Danny would tell me to do these different things. Oh, let's send you to Sierra Leone. And I'm like, I'm not even 100% sure. Is that safe? He goes, I don't know, but it's going to be shit.
We're going to get some good content out of it.
And I tell you what, he was right. It was.
So that was when you met David Hellard.
Yeah. So the Sierra Leone Marathon was so badly organised, and this because they had this one contact who I had to speak to all the time, and he didn't know anything, but he was like really enthusiastic. He was like, "It's going to be great." I'm like, "Well, what day are we going? Like, what do I need to bring?" And he was like, "It's going to be great." And it was all like that the whole time. And eventually got to a point where, like, I don't know if this is going to happen or not. And then I met David at the airport, and it turned out that he wasn't really anything to do with the organisation. He was just there to kind of corral some of the journalists and keep the enthusiasm up and everything.
Right.
And I don't know what it was. It was just we kind of really hit it off at that point. And when men's running kind of transitioned over to being more about like performance and much more into being something that like serious runners were doing, we still met up and we still go to the pub and we talk about running and we different things and everything, and that's really where it came about. It's just really continuing the thing that men's running was about, but just with us two, the podcast. And there weren't really anything else. There weren't any other kind of podcasts about running in that way. So from a positioning perspective, it was a really obvious thing to do. It was a gap. It wasn't necessarily something we go, there's a gap in the market here. We just thought, what's the best way to do it? And we thought about, should we write blogs about it? Or no, we thought actually just doing a podcast was the best, most natural way to do it. So we said to ourselves, okay, let's like sit down. We'll do it over Skype. Let's do a few episodes, see how it goes, see if it's interesting, see if it works. And, we said to ourselves, let's do like half an hour because no one listens to more than that. And it was clear from, I think we recorded about 6 or 7 episodes. And then by November, like almost 10 years ago now, we thought, actually, this is okay. This is, if we put this out, it's not going to be too embarrassing.
Yeah.
It was worse than we could have imagined. Like the sound quality, I don't know what happened in between us recording them and us publishing them, but the sound quality was terrible. It was scrappy. It was everything. But we were really upfront about it. We're like, this is terrible. Like this is, we had an apology at the start. We put an apology at the start of every episode. Go, the sound quality is terrible. We didn't even have a theme tune. Remember, we sang.
Yeah.
We sang a different theme tune each of us took it in turns to sing it. And it just kind of, but we got started. That was the important thing.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably the thing, that almost like the punk aesthetic of it, that was what kind of like, I guess sort of took away the fear for me to to try it.
Yeah.
But as you say, you've been going 10 years, obviously. Now, you've got sponsors, you've won awards.
Yes.
So how many...
Inexplicably. That was back when there were hardly any running podcasts doing anything different. So it's getting there early. First mover advantage with that is really important.
But you've now got as we've seen on the screen, you've got a stage at the running show in Birmingham. How many downloads have you had now? And sort of where is it?
Great. It's great. Well, it's in top 0.5% in terms of podcasts in the world. So it's part of the longevity, part of the fact that we've done so many episodes, and we started off half an hour episodes. Turns out that our audience said they wanted more. So I thought this was absolutely brilliant because it meant that we just didn't have to edit it. So we would, because right at the start I thought, do you know what would be good if I spent time editing, taking out all the ums and the ahs, and because that's just how I speak. And people said it just didn't sound right. It didn't sound like me talking properly. It didn't sound, David is much more eloquent. He can speak, he's a very, very good presenter, where I'm like stumbling, tripping over things all the time. My head's running faster than my mouth. And so as a result of that, we ended up not editing it at all. The only things we took out were maybe references to things like Jimmy Savile and stuff like that, which were kind. Or David would make like extremely litigious statements really early on about runners taking drugs and things like that, which weren't backed up at all. You're just like, right, okay, right, Eddie, can you take that out, please? But it was kind of minimal. Yeah. And as a result of the feedback that we got, people were like, well, we want to listen to it on our long runs, like because there weren't that many podcasts at the time that were doing that, and so we then thought, actually, let's just let it run. And so that's why we started going from, half-hour episodes to episodes that were sometimes 2 hours, 3 hours long, because, we'd have a thing where we talk about it, we'd have an interview. We didn't have interviews at the start because, no one wanted to come on the podcast. Not that we were even asking, but it kind of evolved like that. And I think specifically because of, firstly, we were just really upfront about how, this is a situation, like you can take it or leave it. If you don't, if the quality of the sound bothers you, if the fact that we're swearing all the time bothers you, if you don't like who we are, all those things bother you, then just don't listen to it. Like we're not bothered, and we can completely understand. But also because and I think this is the only time we really listen to feedback, because we extended the time and we spent time and we kind of really unpack stuff and we go off on tangents and things like that. It felt much more like a pub conversation. And especially with podcasting, it's a very, very intimate thing. Like, it feels like you're sat in that conversation as well, especially if you just listen to it on audio. It feels like you're part of that conversation. You're sat in the pub with, it's all going around in circles. Even, one of the most popular episodes, and I can't really explain why, is we did an episode on barefoot running, because it was kind of, at the time, I think I'd had a pair of shoes, Newtons or something, and I got plantar fasciitis off of them, and it was a big issue. So we were talking about it, and it was the same time that I can't remember what the book is called now. It'll come back to me. So we decided to talk about, we know nothing about barefoot running. Nothing. It was like two idiots trying to kind of work out really all the different aspects of barefoot running. But for some reason, people quite liked it because it was just much more natural. It's like before you had Google, and if you were sat in a pub, you could talk about things all the time. Yeah. And you come up to a whole bunch of conclusions. So it was a load of rubbish. But it kind of didn't matter. Like it was more about the journey with it. Yeah. And so I think extending the amount of time that we had, it really, really helped. And also, and it's same way, like, I'm not comparing ourselves to Joe Rogan, but in the same way that Joe Rogan builds a really strong bond with his audience because his things are free flowing, they're long, they take a lot of time. He spends a lot of time. And the great thing about something like a podcast is that people spend huge amounts of time with you. And, just the volume of minutes that people will listen to is incredible. And it also became, because we started using in-jokes, and we didn't mean to start using in-jokes. We would then start, we start calling things stuff. Which meant that in order to understand it, you'd have to go back to episode 1 and start listening. So it became important that there was that episodic order to it. And so people would listen from the start. And people now, like we're almost at 700 episodes.
Wow.
And there are people who will go back to the start and listen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Why will you do that? But there were people who just need to kind of hear the evolution from the start. And it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, how many other mediums allow you to do that? Or people will do that. They won't do that. Go, I'm going to go back to your first YouTube video and watch that, or I'm going to go back to your first blog and read that. There's something really different about that, and I think that's the thing that helped build the community so quickly and the positioning of it.
I mean, obviously we've focused quite heavily on Bad Boy Running. I mean, sort of which was, more of a hobby, I guess, when it started.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what was sort of going on professionally at that time?
So professionally, it was almost, the thing is, I always thought of the two things as separate. Like, Bad Boy Running was created to be minimal in terms of the footprint it took. It was literally like 2 hours a week. It couldn't have been more because David was busy. I think he was in like full-time work still for Accenture. And I was, kind of growing the business, and I had lots of copywriting work on, lots of big clients and things like that. So it couldn't take up more time than a couple of hours a week. And I just thought of the two things. I thought, I'm like, I don't understand I don't understand really where that's going to go. I don't understand really what we're going to do with it stuff. It's a bit of fun at the moment. It's nice. We have a good time. We're doing all these various things. And it wasn't until, I tell this story all the time. It wasn't until I think we were in the NatWest Accelerator. You could get free desk space there. Classic. And I was wearing a BBR hoodie.
Right.
And it says something like, about being disappointed or something like that. It takes this effort to be mediocre. It said something like that on the back of it. And someone came up to me and was like, what's that hoodie? And I'm like, oh, it's from my podcast. Yeah. And we started talking about the podcast, and I was just like, yeah, it's just a podcast and stuff. And I'm like, well, like, how many listeners have you got? And, you've got community and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, kind of thing. And they said, oh yeah, people in this whole area, they were interested about doing that, like interested in hearing about that. So would you be able to do like a workshop, like a 50-minute workshop on it or something like that? So I was like, yeah, okay, I can do that. I can just, talk about some points and maybe point out some of the funny stuff that we do. And when I was doing that, I thought, copywriter's hat on. How do I make this like really kind of punchy and everything? And then I thought, oh, do you know what? Some people have made jokes about it being kind of culty. So let's call it How to Start a Cult. So that'll make sure that it's well attended and people find it funny. And then I thought, what I'll do is I'll map different things in a cult to what we're doing. And it was when I did that it really kind of made me realize, firstly, slightly worried that we had created something that was cult-like. And a lot of the things we'd done, we thought were just like natural things to do. But actually, it was like really smart brand strategy. It was really smart marketing. There was some really smart promotional stuff in there, but it all felt very intuitive. And I think there's a lot of people who do, when they set up a business, when they start a community, they do things which feel intuitive, which feel natural, and they end up with something that really, really works. And so, that on its own led to me then going and speaking about it at the Brighton Summit, which is a big conference and workshop, which I think you got a picture of me doing that.
Oh, was that the Tesla one?
It was, no, it wasn't the Tesla one. It was
that was the far right rally you attended.
It looked like a far right, that's it. But doing that, and then that really opened it up. And from that, the idea of the book and everything else came about. But the real impact of it is that, I was doing all this copywriting. I was doing really, really well. And I was also helping people work more on developing their brands and develop position, things like that. But there was always that element of, like, why is this really working for some people and why is it not working for others? Like, some people, we would do this stuff, it would kind of effortlessly fall into place. Other times, it would just be a real struggle. Like, it's like, and I couldn't understand why. And it wasn't until I started connecting the work that I'd done on the podcast, the hobby, with what I was doing in work, that I then like we've built something that's really quite impressive. And it's all been intuitive. And we had that constraint of needing 2 hours. So we're like, we've got 2 hours a week. What's the most important things that we do? Well, the most important things that we do is we do a broadcast. So make sure that, we are broadcasting something to that audience, but we're also then spending a bit of time in the community as well, doing this kind of stuff that, keeps people happy. And when I say keep people happy, it's mainly abusing them, taking the mick out of them, laughing at them for buying merch and things like that, which completely fit what we do. And like, if we sold them a piece of merch, which would be, we tell them was terrible quality, so they were stupid for buying it in the first place. And if I sold it and I didn't include a message in there that was in some way saying that they're an idiot or they're cheap or something like that, people felt robbed. People felt robbed because it was like a badge of honor to do that. And it sounds incredibly toxic, but it just worked. It just worked because it was the right kind of vibe. And so by like connecting all the dots of what we did with that quite intuitively and that constraint of only having like a couple of hours a week and what should we really focus on, it really opened my eyes to like why certain brands work with a community and what community. It actually flipped on the head about what community is about. Because we, after the podcast, when we actually started the Facebook group in the community, if you've ever started a community, if anyone's ever started a community, they know what it's like. I've got to create loads of content. I've got to get in there every single day. I've got to kind of like get get volume in there, as many people as possible. I've got to keep posting. I've got to do that until there's enough momentum so it becomes self-sustaining. We did the opposite. Like, there's no way we're going to spend time in the group doing all that kind of stuff. But what we found is that within like a few weeks of that group, being there, it was self-sustaining. People were posting stuff themselves. And we realized it was because we got a very clear set of beliefs and set of like rituals and things that we'd created. Again, not necessarily on purpose, just through doing that, but we had like different enemies. And so people had the parameters with which they could talk about those things. And they had that level of like psychological safety within the group, knowing that the things that they're going to talk about are things that other people are going to be thinking about as well. So
common enemy.
Yeah, exactly. They've got a common enemy. And not in a really, really horrible negative way, but in just like things.
Well, this is our tribe.
Yeah.
That's your tribe.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, it's, the whole angle of bad running is people that take running seriously, too seriously is this is not for you if you take running too seriously. And so celebrating people who don't even start, who like, DNF or DNS rather, so people who come into group, like the opposite of most running groups is
which
that people
means did not finish,
did not start. Yeah, exactly. The opposite of like a typical running group, you'll have someone going, oh, I've got my PB and things like that. And everyone will be clapping and everything. If you got a PB and you talked about it in the group, it was almost an instant ban. Yeah. Like if you talked about the excuses you'd made to not come to a race or the injuries that you'd make up and stuff like that, that's when you got rewarded. And so, so it created a very different environment and it made people feel safer within that environment. And so the more safe people feel, the clearer it is to them as to what the point of the group is and the community. And the clearer it is that they understand the connections the shared connections they'll have, the more it'll become self-sustaining. And that is the total opposite of how people teach community. It's always like a top-down thing. And it's like you're there to provide the framework and the structure, and then everyone else is, within that is going to do that themselves. And the really interesting thing that came about as a result of, connecting people in that way and taking the it being so different from other running groups was that we took all of the kind of the shame and the stigma about not being quick, about failing constantly, things like that, and people who wouldn't otherwise go and do big things because they didn't feel ready and stuff like that ended up doing, because we removed all of those expectations. We lowered expectations so low that people felt safe again.
Well, yeah, I was one of those.
You were one of those. Well, you were. So this is one of the enemies that we have, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's an enemy. It's more like triathletes and cyclists. That it's not that we don't like them. Not like in a kind of a right wing, like we hate cyclists, I'm Jeremy Clarkson type way. It's more of a cyclists are cheating. Yeah. Like it's cheating. And the people that cheat the most are the triathletes. And so there was three or four people within the group who were triathletes, and you were one of them. And you all had your own little names as well. There was G-Law, D-Paw, and it was almost, it then became a program of deprogramming you from triathlon and trying to get you to run ultras, and it worked. Like I think every single triathlete in there got cured of triathlons and got into ultras, and everyone followed that journey as well. Because I think that was the other thing about it, is that you don't necessarily see this often with other podcasts, is that we were. And a lot of this was because, David had lots of people in the group who were very well known, but also very vocal. But we had like characters, and characters would do things, and we talk about those things on the podcast. And it created this cast of characters outside of us who people knew. Like people wanted to meet up with you, didn't they? Like independently, because they'd heard about you being talked about on the podcast, or they'd seen you in the group and stuff as well. So that's another really important aspect, and it connects people in a completely different way. So really, developing the ideas behind the book, talking about the kind of that cult brand framework and what we did in the book, that fundamentally changed everything about my business. Like my whole business became centered around that, which is where it is now. The book really and the community. It was a real surprise to me, but those things just come out of nowhere, don't they? Like you think, oh, this thing that I thought was tiny is actually huge.
Yeah.
And you don't realize just how big. And like, it's so funny because when it's been 10 years, they're like, oh my God, how did you manage to do it for 10 years? It struck like that. The way we do it for 10 years is that we didn't think about it in terms of 10 years. We thought about next week. Yeah. Like next week, I'm going to speak to my friend David and we're going to laugh for an hour or so. And that's it.
Yeah.
And is that kind of that level of expectation. So it's all, obviously we built a podcast and a framework around who we were and what we were able to do. And it worked. And that's, I think, why so many people struggle, is because they try and think, oh, do you know why? I'm going to launch a podcast. I'm going to do all this editing in it. I'm going to make it sound professional. And it doesn't last. What is it like 99% of podcasts don't get above 7 episodes or something? Yeah. That's something crazy like that.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to get to number 8 with this one.
We'll celebrate the 7th. But do you remember when we were talking about how hilarious it would be when we get to episode 150?
Yeah.
That was a big thing about being at episode 150. And we passed that really, really quickly. And it was just, we just didn't think about it. And now we don't even know. Like, I think I was talking to a potential sponsor a couple of weeks ago, and I said, oh yeah, we're nearly at like 500 episodes. And David's like, it's 700. I'm like, it's not, is it? Like, just because it's, it doesn't feel like work.
So, I mean, obviously, why do you think it took so long to kind of marry the two? Because I sort of, remember saying to your wife, like, I don't understand why, you have got these two sort of separate things. Yeah. When a genius like me could obviously see where, the perfect synergies were. But, I mean, do you sort of, was there I mean, you've obviously talked about the, doing the talk at the accelerator. Yeah. But, I mean, were there any other sort of factors where you thought actually, I mean, I know one of the things that you talk about is brand marketing. Yeah. And obviously sort of what you've talked about is, in terms of the podcast, it's like, if you don't want people stumbling over their words, if you want, really crystal clear quality.
But really clear up front. And we did a bunch of things which I always wanted to do, and I think because it wasn't work, I felt I had greater courage doing them.
Less pressure.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it would be things like, we get really bad negative reviews. We either got 5-star reviews or 1-star reviews because we're really polarizing. And we got some really, really good 1-star reviews. So it was
Two posh boys.
Two posh boys talking about running. My dog knows more about running. My dog knows more about quantum physics than you know about athletics. So I think it's one of them. Beavis and Butthead do running. That was another one. But yeah, some of them were like really inventive. And so it was about taking those negative quotes and using them in the marketing and putting them on flags and putting them on things, because the audience loved that. Like the following loved that. And also it really spoke to who we were as well. Like, we're not afraid of like negative reviews. We'll absolutely agree that we're like unprofessional and things like that. It's like, you can't, and the thing is, when you do that, like, no one can really hurt you, no one can harm you. It's really interesting. But I think because it was divorce, and also because I never thought of it as, this is a business that we can kind of monetize, there was never that kind of thing in the back of your mind, which I think causes problems with so many people who try to build a community or they try to build a following, because they've got that thing in the back of their mind. You know, when someone at an accountant's or whatever tries to start a local network, you're like, yeah, we know what the end game is here.
Yeah.
It's straight away, you know what the end game is. It's about getting people into it so that essentially they can sell to it. And I think that's what it's so you can see that. You can see the agenda really, really early on. And because we didn't have that, because we didn't worry about getting sponsors, we didn't worry about, you know, trying to attract people onto the podcast, it was a case of we got to a point where eventually people were coming to us because they thought it was the right fit. And that's a very, very different dynamic. And that dynamic, and again, this wasn't particularly conscious, but that dynamic allowed us to be bolder, allowed us to be much more forward in what we were doing, to talk about things that we we're pretty unapologetic about how we talk about brands, about how terrible some of the things they do are and how useless they are and things that they mess up. And as a result of that, and you're never going to find Runners World or anyone talking about that. So we can talk about things that are completely different because we didn't have that pressure of monetization. You know, our monetization came through merch sales. It came through doing, you know, things like these events as well. You know, we got involved in the run show very, very early on. And, you know, as a result of that kind of work, we, you know, because of our position, it made us fit into, you know, what is the UK's biggest running show. You know, there was a position for us there. Like if we were trying to be serious runners,
the naughty corner.
It is like the naughty corner. I mean, like the first year we did it. I can't remember whether you were there first year we did it, but we had essentially that beer keg that we were getting people to drink from, which, you know, you wouldn't normally associate with with the run show. That was banned from the second show. We weren't allowed to do that again. Apparently there was some health and safety issues, even though we should, that we weren't giving it to children or anything else like that. But yeah, I think that was the thing. I see the two things as separate, and I think it wasn't until I thought about the workshop and the book and how to do that, and people started saying, "Oh, how do I like build this kind of community myself?" That's when I saw the two things connecting, and I think it worked because it didn't have that pressure of monetization. And I think that's a really hard thing for businesses or brands who are trying to start those kind of communities, because they want to see a payoff for it, you know, in the first year, second year, third year. Yeah. And actually, rather than really thinking about what is it that we're building. And so you see so many like brands trying to start up like running communities and things like that, and then giving up on it after a few years because it's not giving the kind of the return that they think it is.
So I want to just move on to the book, because I remember when you launched it and there was quite a clever strategy behind it.
Yeah, well, the thing is with everything, it's always so. I had what the really funny thing about the book is that it took me about 6 weeks to write it, which is the fastest that anyone from the publisher said, fastest that anyone written it. And it took me about 8 months to look at the draft that had been edited to get it out, because I was almost allergic to looking at it again.
What? Because
I don't know what it was. It was just like I feel like I've got it out there. I'd rather I don't look at it again. And and so they were like, yeah. And actually, when I looked at it, there was barely any edits and stuff, and anything that I had to do. I had to take out a reference to Jimmy Savile or was it Jimmy Savile or Trump or something like that. I had to take out a couple of references that were
could easily be one or the other.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, I don't know what it is about editors, but every time we've got an editor, they're kind of a little bit. There's stuff they're going, oh, I think you can't say that, or I don't think you can say that. I'm like, I think that's kind of essential for what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You're like, it's quite an aggressive way of talking about it. I'm like, but it's absolutely necessary. And so it is interesting how you go through that process, and you're like, you have to be quite purposeful about how you use certain language and everything. So as a result of that, I wanted to do a launch campaign, and I was trying to think, how do I do something different? Like I don't ever do anything like in a normal way. How do I do something different? How do I launch it in a way actually that helps prove the premise of the book? And so I don't know what it is. I don't know why at that point I thought of Cliff Richard and Mistletoe and Wine, but I did. My dad's a big Cliff Richard fan. I don't know why he popped into my head. But there's something about it. I thought, do you know what would be really good if I could have a Christmas number one? And I thought that's quite a good theme, around the launch of it, and with everything, when you do a campaign, when you do a launch, it's really good to have a theme. And so I thought getting to Christmas #1 is a good theme because you can rally people behind that. And so when it came to the actual launch, I thought this is where do badders, which is the name that we give to people within the Bad Boy Running Crew. Do badders assemble.
They're the opposite of do-gooders.
Do-gooders, that's it, absolutely. So we kind of rallied them behind it, and then I thought, I'm going to go really deep and personal with everyone. So messaging people personally to I do the big call out, say, do you want to help in the launch itself? Have a strategy about it, and again, create a little bit of competition. So I did this strategy whereby essentially I was relying on the launch team rather than on things like big advertising campaign, because I didn't have the funds or the time or anything else like that to get PRs to do things like that. And so worked out actually we got enough people within the community to communicate it. Broke people into teams. Had I think it was about 10 or 15 in different launch teams. Thought very carefully about the names of those launch teams. They all had different animal names, all on WhatsApp. The names didn't mean anything, but everyone thought they meant something, which was great. A little bit of curiosity there. And then set people off at different times to do different things. And it became the really interesting thing. Again, it's another one of those accidental things where you do something that's kind of counterintuitive to what you're told about a launch or something like that. But because the community was really good, people really enjoyed it. They felt part of something. They felt part of the launch. Because the story in the book, is about them as well. And so they took real ownership of it, and they shared it. They do the people. And the thing is, I was asking people to do something quite big. I was asking people to essentially take action for me on Christmas Eve, because we needed to be #1 in the categories we wanted to be in by, I think it was 9 o'clock Christmas Eve in order to do that. And so getting people to do it different times, review at different times, and just people kind of took it upon themselves to do things. They would then start sharing how they were building that into their day. So I was like, I'm making Christmas dinner, and I've also got a reminder to go off to buy the book at this time and things like that. So and then people at the end of it were thanking me for being part of it, and it was kind of a bit of a party, and everyone was really enjoying themselves. And I'm like, the launches aren't like this. Everyone's tired and bored, and they're sick of me talking, things like that. But at the end, they were tracking it for me. They were tracking which category. It's gone #1 in small business. It's gone #1 in entrepreneurship. So it was a really interesting way. And that again, it was one of those things that informed how I do launches now, how I do launch strategies, because by understanding how you've got that community and you could do that, and going personal with stuff. And I think the whole thing around it is around not thinking about it as a volume thing. I need more people. I need to have new people. I need to do those things. It's about going deeper with all those things. And it suits, having a podcast, you go deeper with people because they spend more time with you. A community like that has a very kind of focused philosophy and set of beliefs, you go deeper with them because there's not as many people in it because of that, because it is polarizing. And then when you do things that launch campaigns, and even when we do the run show, we used to have a stall there, stand, which was a congregation point for all the do-badders and people in the community. They go and talk to new runners runners who didn't know about the podcast and things like that. It's funny because when I was trying to talk to people, they say, why should I listen to podcast? I'm like, listen to it, don't listen to it. I'm not bothered.
Yeah.
But then the do-badders would talk about it. I'm like, you made that sound really interesting. The way that they talked about it was so much better. The way that they tailored it, knowing that this person is obviously interested in these things. And that's the thing. They were also like a recruiting team. At no point, and again, this might blow people's mind, at no point did we ever invite anyone into that Facebook group. We never sent out invites. I think David sent out invites right at the start for the podcast, but I don't think in terms of the Facebook group we sent out any invites. And so people just went out and found other people that they knew really suited it, and they and it would also be a badge of honor because they're like, you've got to come to this group, and the whole thing grew from that.
And I know that a reoccurring joke was in the Facebook group was, there's a podcast. Almost like the Facebook group was the main event.
Absolutely.
And there's a podcast attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, there was I can't remember who it was, But it was when I did Winter Nuts. So I made this, just to kind of a bit of context for the viewer listener. I made this at the time. David was really heavily into obstacle course racing. He was part of a team. I mean, that died a death pretty quickly. What a fad that was, as I was joking about. But yeah, he was into that. And I made some comment about how it was easy. It's just a bunch of like monkey bars and stuff like that. But if you master like monkey bars, then you're kind of sorted. So I said, like, pick the hardest race that you can think of in OCR, and I reckon I can do it. And it was Winter Nuts, middle of winter. 4 laps of this course and everything. So I went and did this, and I did only 3 out of the 4 laps because there's a whole justice for Jody thing in relation to this. But I got timed out incorrectly, and it's been like a running joke since. So it's been quite good. But it was at that event where I think it shows you the importance of person to person interaction, because I think it was one of the few times before we were doing the running show, and we had those opportunities to bring people together. But people would come out and someone was like, "Is there a podcast? Like, generally, is there a podcast?" I'm like, "You've been like in our group for like 3 years. How do you not know that? Like, what?" But it shows you, like, that is incredible that it didn't require that. It just required people understanding what the purpose of the community was, what the attraction of it was, who was the right people to invite into it, and it kind of went from there. So, all of these things again are very different from what people teach about brand building, about what people teach about community building, about you doing all of the work. It's like, if you think about these things strategically and you put all these things in place, and a lot of it is not necessarily just putting things in place. It's just having the courage to do those things, the courage to actually be bold, and that's really where most people fall down. The courage to say, well, we're not going to have everybody. This group isn't for everybody. Which is a very difficult thing to justify to other people in your business or other people on your team, because they'll be like, well, you're excluding people, and that's no, everything's supposed to be inclusive, but it's you're inclusive of demographics, inclusive of anyone, but you're exclusive in terms of behaviors and beliefs and values. Absolutely. So that was the kind of the upshot of that, and it's just one of those things where you put all the right things in place and it becomes self-sustaining and it grows on its own. And and all we've really done is just continue to just that hammerbeat of putting those podcasts out, and really it's almost as though people want a shortcut when it comes to marketing, and they want a shortcut in terms of brand, and really the kind of the central pillar of that is constantly showing up. I compare it to the church. Like, it's like, the church is there every Sunday, regardless whether you go. And like, I'm never going to go to church, but I know it's there, and I know it's on, and I know it's available to me if I want it. And so few brands and so few businesses show up in that way. Like, they don't have that level of consistency. And I think people don't really think about how much trust that builds, and how much security that creates, and how much safety that creates for them people to interact with you, to think about you in that way. I think it's just a really underplayed element, because there's such a plethora of ways of communicating and broadcasting and doing it for free, that people actually think about it's not really what you're doing. It's about having that consistency and doing it. And also the important thing that is that consistency is that you're doing something that aligns with how you work and what you will continue with.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Oh no!
But you're gonna have to come on again. Especially if none of the text works and it hasn't recorded.
Well, the thing is, tech not working. The key to making sure that tech works is to not have any tech, as we well know.
But if people want to find out more about Bad Boy Running and how to start a cult, what socials, what channels can they find you?
So the best place to go is to howtostartacult.co.uk. But what I will be able to do is, for your listeners and viewers who want to find out a little bit more about the framework and the blueprint, I will make a cheat sheet available at howtostartacult.co.uk/mind your business. Be able to go there, have a look at that. There's be some resources on there as well, and explore that further.
Awesome. Well, obviously we'll put that in the show notes. But thanks very much, Jody. As I say, for the first podcast, you were the only choice, I think. So,
No, brilliant.
so
Oh,
thanks
thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. Good to be on.